Hey, everybody. I'm so glad that you are finding this however you're finding this. This is not an accident. Welcome to At the Table. Of course, I'm Pastor Ken, and I got a very special guest that is here with me today. You know, there's so many things that are happening in our nation, and my question is always, what will be the response of the church, and what will be the response of people in the church? And I know that there are so many of us who are protesting or we're using our platforms to speak up and speak out. But as a person who has a public platform, I have to do a little bit of both. I got to speak up, I got to speak out, but then I need to figure out how we can bring about reform. I need to figure out what part can the church play. And so one of the things that we did is we called over to the governor's office and we talked to our mayors in both cities, and we began to reach out to our chief of police. And the first call that I made was to Tony Jones here, who is the chief of police here in Gainesville, Florida, where we have one of our campuses, and he was the first person to call me back. And we've known each other for several years, of course, as our church has done ministry in this city. And he is just a great man. He's a man of faith. He's a family man. He just told me he has two great-grandchildren. And I don't know about you. I just think that a man is blessed if he has grandkids. Yes. But if a man has great-grandkids, yes, I want to hear wisdom from how he got that far. And he has been a chief of police for many years now. I'm going to let him tell his story about how long he's been chief of police and everything. But I am so honored. So wherever you're watching this, please give me a virtual shout out. Give me some drum rolls for my guest today, Chief Tony Jones. Welcome. So glad that you're here with me today. Man, it is such an honor that you would take out of your busy schedule. Here we are in the middle of a pandemic and rioting and protesting and racial tension. But you've just decided to come over and be able to share so our viewing audience could be blessed. And I just want to say thank you for that.
No problem. No problem.
Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? Like, when did you become a police officer? How long have you been a part of the force? How long have you been chief? Anything like that?
Yeah, I started my career I started my career as a police explorer. In high school, I made up my mind that law enforcement would probably be my trajectory in life. I grew up in East Gainesville. I saw some things that I didn't like, and I said, I want to change those things. And so I became an explorer. It was tough in my neighborhood to be a police explorer in high school, going to Eastside High School. But I had a police sergeant. He's no longer with us, but his name was Ernest Long. Okay. And he kept recruiting me from high school, and I ran from him a couple times, you know. And then one time he went to my mom's house and said, Tony told me he was going to go to the meeting, and he didn't show up. So Mom said, get yourself to that meeting. Mm-hmm. But it was enlightening to me. I did that. I was one of the youngest police cadets in the academy. I went to the academy at 18 years of age.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
That was right at around 1975.
1975.
Right.
So you've been a part of the force for, what's that?
Well, you're going like 40. Me. Yeah, it's older than you, sir.
Well, I was born in 78. Yeah. I'm 42 years old.
So it's about 44 years, actually, that I've been affiliated. Now,
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay.
I took some breaks, I must admit. I went back to school because going into the academy with just a high school diploma, graduating from the academy, going out onto the streets of Gainesville as a police officer, I knew that I needed some more formal education. So I went to Santa Fe, and upon completing Santa Fe, kind of wanted a break. So I got away and I went to school out of state. I went to this small college in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, called the University of Alabama.
Small college.
Yes, a little small college. And after that, I obtaining the bachelor's degree. Of course, I remained on with the police department. I've had an opportunity. I've been blessed to work just about every division in the police department, with the exception of forensics and internal affairs. I did patrol, crime prevention, explorers. I was once the special operations unit where I worked undercover. I also managed our narcotics division, went on to be a district commander. And then when it just about time for me to retire, a position became available on an interim basis as assistant city manager. I took that for the administrative component of it. It was a whole new world, and I worked under Mr. Wayne Bowers, and it was a great experience. Upon leaving that, I was ready to retire, and we were building the Reichert House, and they asked me would I complete that assignment. I said yes, and came back as interim police chief, and here I am today, your police chief. This is my 10th year.
So your 10th year being a police chief.
Yes.
But a part of the force some way or another for on and off 45 years or so.
That's correct.
That is amazing.
That's correct.
Amazing. And so when I was reaching out to different people, he was the first to call me back. I wasn't calling for us to have this conversation, but as we were talking and I was asking him questions about social injustice and what could we do to help and how can we bring about reform, I just felt the Holy Spirit was like, you need to sit down and you guys need to do a recording that we can share with our audience. And so we're calling today Behind the Badge, hashtag Behind the Badge, because you need to know what it's like to be in law enforcement. You need to know what it's like to have a life that's beyond the badge. I think it's amazing, his story, that this is a black man that has been the chief of police for 10 years,
That's
a part
correct.
of the force for 45 years.
That's correct.
How has it been being black and in your position?
Early on, when I first joined the police department, Gainesville was a segregated city.
Okay.
The civil rights laws had passed, and all that, but still it was black and white. But I knew I had a job to do, and I endured. I endured, got called a lot of names, not by my fellow officers, but by people in the community, just being an African-American responding to calls for service. I definitely got called a lot of derogatory terms.
Oh, wow.
And, but I was on a mission.
Okay.
And my mission was, which I said in the interview, I want to help people.
Okay.
So I put those things aside, and I went out to help people and go from there. When you fast forward to where I am today as a police chief, we have a very diversified pool of police chiefs throughout the United States.
Right.
So I'm happy to see where we come from the days I began and to the days where I'm at now. Okay. You still get some pushback, particularly when you start talking police reform.
Right.
Some people say I went a little to the left, but I go to my basic staples of I joined this profession to help people.
To help people.
Yes.
So can you just tell me, what is your perspective as a chief of police with the social injustices that we see? So we had the George Floyd thing, and of course we've had a past of some things, but just as a black man who is in a position of authority, what's your perspective on it?
I think overall, we got a lot of good police officers out there. But in any profession, you're going to have some rogue officers, some rogue staff, or whatever the case may be, that is going to cut corners and going to carry out responsibilities not in the prescribed light. And when I look at what happened, unfortunately, to Mr. Floyd, I just could not imagine or even try to understand to place a knee on someone's neck for 6 to 9 minutes.
Right.
And the person is complaining that they cannot breathe.
Right.
That sent a chilling impact to me as a police chief, or even as a black man, or just an American.
Just a man.
Just
a human being.
That was something that it makes me work harder. It makes you work harder.
So do you think that amongst police, this is a very common thing? So the media or even the narrative seems like police brutality and injustices are happening very, very often. Do you have any stats, or what has just been your experience? What's your perspective about, is that something that's happening a whole lot and we're not talking about it as much and it needs to go through more reform? Or do you feel like the media's taking it to a higher level than actually what it is?
I think law enforcement is evolving. Okay, and some practices in the past has been accepted. Like, for instance, when I first joined the police department, we had the flee and felon law. If someone commit a felony and you have exhausted all means to apprehend that individual and they continue to flee, you could shoot them. And right here in Gainesville, that happened, right across the nation.
That would be a hard thing because you could shoot based upon your judgment.
Yes.
And that's
so
the hard thing.
if you saw a person that you suspected had committed a felony, you could do it. But Gainesville, I want to tell you, was progressive.
Right.
We worked in under a former chief. He's no longer with us, named Atkins Warren.
Okay.
And he came in and he reversed that policy on the agency.
Okay.
And he was saying, we're going to kill someone over a piece of property.
Right.
If the property was of a felony value, you could shoot it.
Right.
And after that, there was a Supreme Court ruling, Tennessee versus Garner, where a subject stole a television and was fleeing the police officers up there. They exhausted every means to take him in, and they shot this individual. And so things have changed. So that's why I was saying that, and it's still changing. It's still evolving. And when you look at where we are today, I think the media will look at some of the shortcomings and will put it out there. I think law enforcement is looking at themselves and saying, okay, how can we serve our people better? So it's a combination of both.
So I like that. It's almost like you're taking a bird's eye view and you're saying that obviously we can get better.
Always.
But at the same time, there's another side of the story where there's a lot of good police officers. And I think that anybody who has common sense knows that. I mean, we have great police officers here.
Right.
But, my concern is a little bit like I am so much, because a pastor, I'm into injustices. So I'm like, okay, we need to make sure that there's justice. And my heart breaks with empathy for those whose hearts breaks. But then there's another side of the story, and I'm wondering, like, how police officers are feeling right now. Do they feel like people are against me, or is there a fear? Is there a boundary or a wall between the community and the enforcement? What do you think?
Two responses to that. I think the way officers are feeling now, as a matter of fact, I was speaking with one of our captains before I came here today, that we are being judged by what happened in the Floyd instance.
Right.
That all cops think that way. And if I can give one thing to America, that is not the case. That was an individual decision by those officers to do what they did. All police officers don't think that way. We are a profession. We're here to protect. We're here to serve. But we're also here to do it in partnership with the community. So you protect, you serve, but you also do it in partnership with the community. So you do feel somewhat slighted. That they're portraying us as this savage animal that got a badge and a gun that would go out and willfully and wrongfully do something like happened to Mr. Floyd. So the public, what I'm asking is, you see it, but don't think that all officers are that way. Yes.
I've been teaching our church a lot about empathy. Empathy is like my word right now, being able to live in another person's shoes. In the same way that my heart goes out to to George Floyd and his family, my heart also goes out to those who serve with honor.
Yes.
And, from military first responders, of course, to the police force. And some of them are our family and our brothers. And I just feel like there's a side of the story that I wanted to hear from you so that my heart could break with your heart as well.
Yes.
I wanted to just ask you, really, how do you feel? Like, do you feel betrayed? Do you feel like people misunderstood? And what can we do to maybe even change that perception?
I feel, as a police chief, misunderstood. I think that would be the term that I would use. Again, as I said earlier, we're not like what you see on television or some of the videos that is going around viral around the nation. I think you have to look at each individual officer and you have to look at each department and make your judgment based on that. When you look at the things that we do in the community under community policing, where we know that the basics of building a rapport with the community is trust. And you don't get trust overnight. This is something that you have to continually work at. And I can tell you the Gainesville Police Department, as well as some of the other agencies around the Sheriff Department and all, what we've been trying to do long before the Floyd incident, long before really what we had in Ferguson and some of the other places, is work with the community. Because when you work against the community, the only person that is going to survive is the bad person.
Right.
So you got to get out there. You got to engage the community in crime watch meetings.
Right.
But the other thing that we engage in with is problem solving.
Okay.
If we know that we have a problem out there, you have to be bold and open enough to sit down and talk with the community. We do this through community dialogues,
right.
Youth dialogue. And sometimes those things are not pretty.
Right.
They're saying the way you coming into our neighborhood,
yeah,
we don't like it.
Right.
You know, I'll never forget, we had a community in East Gainesville say every time my children come home, they're stopped.
Right.
And so what we did was we had a real tough community meeting. And after that, what we did was we had a community day.
Okay.
Where the officers get to know the residents and the residents get to know the officers.
That's good.
But they came up with this together working with the staff.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, one of the things, the principles that we're trying to teach people is to be intentional with diversity. So in our church, we're saying if you're white, be inclusive with black friends, like intentionally get to know people. But as you were talking, I was just thinking, wouldn't that be a great thing that if we had intentional opportunities to expose the next generation to police officers?
Yes.
And do you have that to where we can bring our young people and expose them to good cops so that the narrative isn't a deception?
Yes, we have a number of things that we do with our young people. Of course, those that go to school, we got the school resource officers, school resource deputies, where you get a chance to see and work with officers not in a non-confrontational manner.
Okay.
The other thing that we did, and I took it from Philadelphia, we do what's called a youth dialogue.
Okay.
And what we do is we can come to this church and we have a 4-hour session with young people, but for every young person we have, we bring about 10 or 12 police officers.
Yeah.
And what we want the young people to realize that beyond this uniform, we're human beings.
Yeah.
Okay, so we sit down and we talk about our ups and downs. They talk about our ups and downs. You walk out of it, you understand the young people better, and young people understand you better.
Yeah.
And we got some stats that will show that it made a difference.
Right.
The other thing that you have to do, if you have to go from the non-traditional, the traditional to the non-traditional ways. Sometimes you have to meet people where they are.
Okay.
And in meeting people where they are, we encourage our officers just to get out, talk with people.
Right.
Have y'all seen about 3 or 4 years ago, we had Officer Bobby White, they called him basketball cop.
Yeah.
And he established that rapport with kids on the street
Okay.
just playing basketball. So it's a number of things that we do that you have to do that outreach.
Okay.
If you don't, then people, the only interaction they have with the police a lot of times is negative or what they see on social media.
And I would encourage those of you all who are watching, educate your children, bring them around good police officers.
Yes.
So that they can know and so that they don't live their life in fear.
Exactly.
What would you say, and for some reason I just have a single mother in my heart, or the woman who's scared for her young black children to get pulled over, and it's almost like this fear thing. So what I feel like what we're hearing is like almost be afraid of the police. I mean, you got to put like this, you got to do this. And I always tell people that my interactions with the police have been wonderful.
Okay.
Now, I'm a black dude. I'm not a big black man. I'm a brown dude with curly hair. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the favor of the Lord, the protection of the Lord, or maybe it's just, you know, circumstances. I don't know. But police have been very nice to me. They let me go. I do dumb stuff. They just let me go time and time again. But I know that that's not everywhere. And I know at least probably 10 friends that I've had that have been interrogated on the hood, haven't done anything, and have been treated rough. What do we do with the fear, though? What do we do with that single mom that's like, I don't want my kids to be? So what happens is that if you are automatically afraid, your responses are different. When you get pulled over, when anything happens, you are literally living your life, and fear attracts just like faith attracts. And I just don't know what to do about the fear. Can you help us with that?
Call us.
Okay.
If you have a single mom, family mom, whatever, if you have a child in the household and you're concerned about their safety, when they're out in the community, their safety from police officers.
Right.
Give us a call. We'll be happy to come out and talk with that family.
Right.
We'll be happy. We do a thing called You and the Law.
Okay.
We did it for years. I've taught it, where we kind of explaining our role in society. We're kind of explaining what the law is in society.
Okay.
I did one, I'll never forget, at a church in East Gainesville. 2 summers ago, we had a horrendous amount of burglaries where kids were just going into unlocked cars and taking things. Parents didn't know that was a felony.
Oh, wow.
And when I told them that in that church, they almost ran me out the church. Well, you're saying my child is a felon.
Right.
If they go into a car and they take something out of the car.
They didn't know the law.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a burglary.
Right, it's a burglary.
And so after we explained it, then they said, oh, okay. But at first, tensions were up.
Right.
The more we communicate, the more we understand each other.
Yeah, that's very true.
And that's what we're missing a lot.
Right.
Yes.
Huh, wow. So what would you say, okay, so my whole thing is that when there's injustices, I feel like people feel that there's nothing they can do.
Okay.
So the people that are rioting, I don't think we need to waste our time on that. They're
Right.
idiots. This is ridiculous. Violence don't do nothing.
Right.
We got that.
Right.
But I think that the reason that some are lashing out because they don't know where to go. Now, it seems to me that you've ran a healthier precinct and you've went about reform, and maybe you can tell us some of the things that you've done. But that was one of my questions as a pastor. As I speak to chief of police, I'm like, what can we do to help those who have bias and bigotry in their heart? Is there a way that we can bring them on and take them through diversity sensitivity training? How can we bring about reform to where we can make sure that officers who have those biases aren't released to where they can make those judgment calls?
Right.
What is there anything that can be done?
Yes, there is. And you can do all kind of training. New York City went through a lot of training by individuals from the University of South Florida, Dr. Laura Friedel.
Okay.
And you saw what happened in New York City.
Right.
When you're looking at recently what is going on. Training is something that when you start talking about biases, you're talking about implicit biases or unconscious biases, things that you've seen coming up. Like, for instance, if you see a pit bull, not talking about the one here, but you say, oh, all pit bulls are vicious.
Right.
That's what you've been taught
Right.
all your life.
Right.
So if you see one, you tense up.
Right.
And it could be farthest from the truth.
Right.
But when you say explicit biases, then that's when you come out and say, I hate that chair because it's gray.
Yeah. You mean explicit meaning like you've agreed with the
Yeah,
bias.
you've agreed with
nurtured
it.
so long.
You're saying
It's
that,
become-
okay, and you're going to be vocal about it.
Okay.
Where implicit could be subconscious.
Okay.
Explicit, that chair is gray, I hate it.
And you believe that reality.
And I believe that reality. It takes training.
Right.
It takes a different culture
Right.
that is not going to allow you to go out and make statements or so forth like that. And it takes monitoring over a period of time.
Okay.
One training is not going to do it.
Okay.
You have to do a continuous thing. And you do not want biases, be it implicit or explicit, to guide your decisions as a police officer out in the field. That's when it gets dangerous.
So who does the average everyday person talk to? Do we call our congressman? Do we call our chief? Do we call our sheriff? How do those things, so this broadcast is going to people in all over the nation, really all over the world, but let's focus on the U.S. And they're probably like, well, that ain't our chief of police. Like, our chief of police is a white man that don't care anything about us, so forth and so on. So how would the average everyday person get their voice heard to bring about reform in the police department?
My suggestion to you is start at the top with the chief.
Start with the chief.
Start at the top with the chief or sheriff.
Okay.
I have had people come and tell me, Chief Jones, I don't like what your officers are doing in this particular way. Chiefs, if you're listening, have an open door.
Yeah.
I know you're busy.
Right.
I'm busy too. But have an open door and at least listen. I'd rather communicate in non-crisis situation than trying to pull a group together in a crisis mode.
Yeah.
And what you do is sit down, listen to them and tell the citizens, and y'all come up with some type of agreement as to what you would like to add to the training, and invite citizens to be part of your agency through volunteerism.
Yeah.
Be a part of it instead of being apart from your agency.
Is there any de-escalation training that goes into things? So
Yes.
a police officer goes through training that, because I was told, and I don't know if it's true, that they go through many more offensive training than they do de-escalation. Is that true, and what can we do about it if it is?
You have a philosophy, if you want to call it, warrior versus guardian.
Oh, okay.
And when they had the 21st century policing seminar, President Obama bought that, and that was clear. What are you training your officers to be? Are you training them to be a warrior, to go out there like a soldier and a robot and just, arrest whatever the case may be? Are you training them to be a guardian?
Right.
And my thing is that an officer is going to have a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because if somebody's shooting at you,
Yeah.
which I've been in that situation,
Yeah.
that warrior part is going to have to come out. But when you start talking about de-escalation,
Right.
that guardian side,
Yeah.
wait, can we slow it down? We don't need to move this fast. Let's talk with this individual.
Right.
Let's try to see what is the issue behind the action.
Right.
So you got to know a little bit of both.
Okay.
And that comes with training and time on the road.
Okay.
And time out there in the position. When I say road, that means service,
Okay.
out actually serving people.
Okay, that's good. So what I'm learning, it seems like there's some things that we can do as
Yes,
like
there is.
everyday people.
Yes.
There's conversations that we need to have, letters that we can write.
Yes.
There's things that we can do. That's really good.
But I stress,
Uh-huh.
I was blessed to serve on the National Juvenile Justice Council, so they flew me all over the United States. I often would tell people when they say, well, this agency don't do this agency don't do that, go and speak to your chief and your sheriff because they're going to set the pace of that agency.
Okay.
So go and speak to them. Please at least give them an opportunity
Right.
to hear your concerns
That's
and
so
then
good.
go from there.
I love that.
Yes.
So what would be, if I was to say, what is the main thing that you would like to communicate to the nation at this time? So let's assume this was a Fox, CNN moment, and they had you on an interview, and you're like, this is what I want you to know. Maybe 1, 2, even 3 things. What is that main 1 or 2, few things that you're like, this is what y'all need to know?
First of all, police officers, law enforcement officials, we're human.
Right,
Do we make mistakes? Yes.
right,
Will we make more mistakes? Yes. But we want you to know that we are not cookie cutters, and what you saw on the national news does not represent the vast majority of officers that we have in the United States.
right,
The second thing is, if you want to really affect a change in your community, communications
communication.
in non-crisis modes.
Okay.
You can't wait until something happened and then try to talk because you're speaking under duress then.
Right.
But if we can begin to plan and prepare and work with each other, we would have a better community, a better state, and a better nation.
Okay.
So those are the things. And then training for police officers.
Okay.
We have to look at some of the latest and greatest training when it comes to de-escalation, when it comes to procedure justice. These are things that you can't just do one time.
Right.
These are things that you're going to have to do over and over again
Right.
till it becomes a philosophical stance of that agency.
Okay.
So those would be my things.
There was one thing that you said on the phone that really sparked the meeting, and it was about trust. And
Yes.
you mentioned it in the beginning of this. Can you speak to me a little bit about how do we get that? What do we need? What does that mean? Why is that important?
Trust, if you don't have trust, you will not have a partnership or rapport with the community.
Between the
Officers and the community. But it goes both ways.
Right.
Officers have to trust the community, but the community, you got to trust us also.
Yeah.
And the way that you build that trust is through communications.
Okay.
You got to communicate. You got to get out from your vehicle.
Right.
You got to get out. You got to walk and talk, not only with the common person that you would see that is a shop owner or whatever the case may be, but you got to go on some of the corners like the basketball cop, and you got to talk with some of the young people.
Okay.
You may have to go to some rough neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I got to walk one next Thursday.
Okay.
And I'm walking in the afternoon. talking to
Right.
build trust
Right.
with the residents.
Wow.
Those that are not going to show up at a meeting.
Right.
So you go and meet with them.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So good. So good. Wow, that is amazing. I would say my last question then, and thank you so much for your time.
No
This
problem.
has been rich.
No problem.
My last question would be, as a pastor of a growing, thriving church, what is your advice for me about how the church can help the law enforcement? How can we help you? How can we serve our city? How can we serve you better?
Please partner with us,
In which
with
way?
your parishioners that you have in this building and buildings across the United States. If you can partner with us, if you can help get the message out that police officers are good,
Right.
if you can help us with some of our activities, we need mentors.
Yeah.
We need so many things that our officers can't do, and help guide us.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way. I would say if for the faith-based community, I want to build a stronger partnership.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you want us to be more involved.
Yes.
And be there to do some of the spiritual things. So we're going to reach out to you and
Yes.
Continue to build that
Yes.
bridge.
Yes.
Man, that's been so rich. Any closing thoughts? You feel like we got it all covered there?
I think we got it all covered, but just remember, if I had to stress anything, partnership, talk with us.
Talk with you.
Talk with us. Don't be afraid of us.
Yeah.
Let's work together.
Yeah.
Let's make this a great nation.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to At the Table. Of course, this was a special edition with Chief Tony Jones, the Chief of Police here in Gainesville, Florida, who is doing an outstanding job, by the way. We're so appreciative of you. I told him that we're praying for him every single day. We have a group of people at 8 a.m., and all of those who are in authority, like him and his family, we are covering them in prayer. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please make sure that you share this. Share this with other young black men. Share this with whites, blacks, yellows. Everybody needs to hear about this. This is just another voice that needs to get added into the mix, because right now it is very, very one-sided. And it's very important that we see a broad picture that the police officers are human beings as well, and they're doing their very best to protect and to serve. And so we love you guys. Please comment. Please share. We'll see you soon. God bless you.